The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly around Orbital Station Epsilon, a metallic structure hanging like a silent sentinel among distant stars. J. Park walked the station's main corridor, his boots making soft echoing sounds against the polished metal floor. He was a cargo hauler, used to long journeys and silent spaces, his dark eyes constantly scanning the environment with practiced ease. The station hummed with its usual background noise, distant mechanical whirs, soft communication signals, and the quiet movements of various species passing through. Most were traders, travelers, or workers moving between planetary routes. Few paid attention to anything beyond their immediate purpose. That's when Jay first saw her. She stood near a maintenance access point, her body pressed against the wall as if trying to become invisible. Her form was thin, unnaturally so, with skin that seemed almost translucent, showing hints of delicate bone structures underneath. Her clothing, if one could call it that, was tattered and looked like remnants of something once elegant. Her eyes caught Jay's attention first. Large, deep, filled with a mixture of exhaustion and something deeper, a profound weariness that spoke of incredible hardship. Those eyes held stories of survival, of journeys that most would never comprehend. Around her, station workers and other travelers deliberately avoided making eye contact. Some shifted uncomfortably, others quickened their pace. It was a universal response to something unknown, something that didn't fit into their comfortable understanding of the universe. But Jay was different. He noticed how her hands trembled slightly. How her breath came in short, controlled gasps. How she seemed to be holding herself together through sheer willpower. Years of traveling across different star systems had taught him to read body language, to understand the subtle signs of distress that transcended species. Station life was harsh. Resources were limited, and compassion was often seen as a luxury few could afford. Everyone was fighting their own battle for survival, for a small piece of security in the vast, unforgiving cosmic landscape. The alien woman, for she was clearly not from any species Jay immediately recognized, seemed on the verge of collapse. Her posture suggested she hadn't eaten in days, perhaps weeks. Her movements were calculated, each step carefully planned to conserve what little energy remained in her body. Other travelers looked away, a universal gesture of dismissal. In space, showing weakness often meant being left behind. The unspoken rule was simple: survive, or be forgotten. But something about her caught Jay's attention. Maybe it was the dignified way she held herself despite her obvious suffering. Perhaps it was the quiet strength that radiated from her, even in her most vulnerable moment. He watched her for several minutes, observing how she seemed to be mapping the station's layout, looking for something, safety, perhaps, or a temporary shelter. Her eyes darted quickly, assessing potential threats, potential routes of escape. Station Epsilon was not kind to strangers. Especially not to strange, seemingly injured aliens who didn't belong to any recognized trade or diplomatic group. She was an anomaly, and in this structured environment, anomalies were often treated with suspicion. Jay knew he could easily walk past her. It would be the smart, safe choice. Many would argue it was the only logical response in a universe where resources were scarce and personal survival was paramount. But something in her eyes stopped him. A single moment of connection. A silent plea that didn't require words. A universal language of survival, of hope, of desperate need. He took a step towards her, knowing that this single decision might change everything. The station continued its mechanical rhythm, unaware that a small, significant moment was about to unfold, a moment that would challenge the cold, calculated survival logic of space travel. Jay Park moved forward, his cargo hauler's uniform crisp, his intentions not yet fully formed, but something fundamental already shifting within him. Jay approached slowly, each step deliberate and careful. The alien woman didn't move, but her eyes tracked his movement with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Space had taught her that sudden movements often meant danger. His hand reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a standard-issue meal pack. These were typical for cargo haulers: compact, nutrient-dense packages designed to sustain human workers during long interstellar journeys. The silvery package reflected the station's harsh lighting, looking almost like a lifeline. The woman's body tensed. Her muscles, though weak, showed a readiness to flee or defend herself. Years of survival had probably taught her that kindness was often a trick, a moment of false hope before another disappointment. Jay spoke softly, knowing she might not understand his words. "Here," he said, extending the meal pack towards her. For a moment, nothing happened. The station's background noise seemed to fade. Other travelers continued their journeys, paying no attention to the small interaction happening in a forgotten corner of the corridor. Her hand moved slowly at first, then with increasing desperation. Trembling fingers reached out, touching the package as if it might disappear. When Jay didn't pull away, she gripped it with surprising strength. The package opened with a soft hiss. Nutrient-rich gel and compact protein blocks emerged. The smell, artificial but food-like, filled the small space around them. Her reaction was immediate and unexpected. Tears began streaming down her face. Not quiet tears. Not controlled, dignified weeping. These were raw, powerful tears that seemed to carry years of pain, of survival, of incredible loneliness. They floated in the low gravity, creating small crystalline droplets that caught the station's artificial light. Jay stood still, unsure how to respond. In his years of space travel, he had seen many things. Tough negotiations. Brutal trade deals. Complex diplomatic exchanges. But he had never seen someone break down so completely from receiving a simple meal. The woman, Hannah, he would later learn was her name, wasn't just crying about food. Her tears spoke of something deeper. Survival. Hope. The unexpected kindness of a stranger in a universe that had been nothing but cruel. Her hands shook as she began to eat. Not wolfing down the food like someone starving, but taking careful, controlled bites. Each movement suggested she was used to rationing, to managing scarce resources. Around them, the station continued its mechanical rhythm. Other travelers moved past, their eyes sliding over the scene without truly seeing. In the vast, cold expanse of space, individual stories often went unnoticed. Jay watched her, his professional demeanor softening. Cargo haulers weren't known for emotional displays. Their world was about efficiency, about moving resources from one point to another. Compassion was a luxury few could afford. But something about her touched something deep within him. Her clothing, once perhaps elegant, was now a collection of patches and worn fabric. Signs of multiple repairs, of a journey that had taken everything from her. Her skin, a pale lavender color, showed the marks of hardship, slight scars, areas of discoloration that spoke of difficult environments. When she finished eating, she looked up at Jay. No words were spoken. But in that moment, something passed between them. A connection that transcended language, species, the cold calculations of survival. Her eyes, large, deep, filled with an emotion beyond gratitude, said everything words could not express. In that forgotten corridor of orbital station Epsilon, a simple act of kindness became something more. Not just a meal shared, but a bridge between two different worlds, two different experiences of survival. Jay didn't know it then, but this moment would change everything. The station continued its journey through the endless darkness of space, unaware that a small, profound human connection had just occurred in its forgotten corridors. The translation device was old but functional. Jay pulled it from his communication kit, a device that had seen countless interstellar conversations. Its screen flickered, then stabilized, ready to bridge the language gap between two very different beings. Hannah watched the device with cautious eyes. Her fingers, still trembling slightly from the meal, touched the small screen. Something about her movements suggested she had used translation technology before, but not recently. "Your name?" Jay asked simply, pointing at her, then at the device. "Hannah," she responded. The device translated her words with a slight mechanical echo, converting her native sounds into standard galactic language. Her story emerged in fragments. Broken pieces of a larger, more complex narrative of survival. Hannah wasn't just a refugee. She was the last survivor of an entire settlement group. Her people had lived on a distant planet, peacefully existing in a complex ecosystem that balanced technology and natural harmony. Then came the war. Not a simple conflict, but a systematic destruction that targeted her entire civilization. Larger, more aggressive species saw her people as an obstacle. Their planet's resources were valuable. Their technological knowledge was threatening. The solution was brutal in its simplicity: complete elimination. Jay listened. His hands remained still, his face controlled, but his eyes told a different story. They absorbed every detail, every nuanced moment of her painful recollection. Hannah described how her people were pushed from their home systems. First slowly, then with increasing violence. Diplomatic channels closed. Trade routes were blocked. Small attacks became larger invasions. Entire communities were scattered, then destroyed. She had watched her family die. Her community collapse. Her entire cultural history reduced to memories and a few portable data crystals she carried with her. The translation device sometimes struggled. Certain emotional nuances got lost. But the core of her story remained powerful and clear. She was a survivor in a universe that seemed designed to crush her kind. Why? Jay asked. A simple question that carried enormous weight. Hannah's response was complicated. Resources. Territory. The cold calculations of galactic powers that saw living beings as numbers, as potential assets or potential threats. Her journey had been long. She had traveled through multiple star systems, always moving, always hiding. Trading small skills for temporary protection. Avoiding the larger species that had destroyed her home. Carrying with her the last fragments of her civilization's knowledge. The station around them continued its mechanical breathing. Distant communication signals. The soft hum of life support systems. A universe that moved forward, indifferent to individual stories of loss and survival. Jay understood something fundamental in that moment. Survival wasn't just about physical endurance. It was about carrying hope. About preserving something deeper than individual life: cultural memory, collective experience. Hannah's story wasn't just her own. It was a narrative of resistance. Of refusing to be completely erased. Her eyes, when she finished speaking, held no bitterness. Just a profound, almost mathematical understanding of the universe's harsh realities. She had seen destruction. Yet she remained. The translation device powered down, its task complete. But the story hung in the air, a living, breathing entity more powerful than mere words. Jay realized he was holding his breath. Something had shifted. This was no longer just an encounter with a stranger. This was a connection that challenged everything he understood about survival, about humanity's place in a complex galactic ecosystem. Outside the station's windows, stars continued their silent journey. Countless worlds existed, each with their own stories of survival, of loss, of unexpected connections. Hannah looked at Jay. No more words were needed. Understanding had been established, deeper than language, more profound than a simple act of sharing a meal. The universe watched, silent and indifferent. Jay's communication device buzzed with life. His network was extensive, not because he was powerful, but because he was connected. Years of cargo hauling meant knowing people in every corner of inhabited space. First call went to Maria Rodriguez, a coordinator at the Interstellar Refugee Support Network. Her office handled impossible cases, finding solutions where governments saw only problems. Another lost species, she asked, her voice tired but professional. Jay explained Hannah's situation carefully. Each word measured, each detail precise. Maria understood immediately. These were the cases that slipped between bureaucratic cracks, living beings without official documentation, without recognized planetary representation. The station's communication hub allowed encrypted transmissions. Jay used channels most wouldn't know existed. Humanitarian networks, diplomatic backchannels, independent support groups, he activated them all. Hannah watched silently. Her eyes tracked Jay's movements, understanding something significant was happening but not fully comprehending the complexity of human intervention. Hours passed. Calls connected. Information transferred. Background checks initiated. Refugee processing protocols began their slow, methodical dance. Other station workers started noticing. A cargo hauler spending hours helping a strange alien wasn't normal procedure. Some watched with curiosity. Others with suspicion. A few with growing respect. The station's social dynamics began shifting. Whispers spread. Who was this alien? Why was J. Park so invested? Maria's team worked quickly. They needed medical records, species classification, potential resettlement zones. Each piece of information was a lifeline for Hannah. Jay discovered her species had unique genetic markers. They were technological cultivators, beings who could terraform difficult planetary environments. Their knowledge was rare. Their potential, enormous. But they had been systematically targeted. Eliminated. Pushed to extinction by larger, more aggressive galactic powers. Hannah represented more than herself. She was a living library of a nearly forgotten civilization. Diplomatic channels opened. Slowly. Carefully. Independent human support networks began mobilizing. Not through official government structures, but through a web of connected individuals who understood the value of preservation. "We'll need her full genetic profile," Maria said during a secure transmission. "And any cultural artifacts she might have preserved." Jay looked at Hannah. She was organizing her few remaining possessions, data crystals, small technological components, fragments of her previous life. The station's other inhabitants started changing. Initial suspicion transformed into curiosity. Then understanding. Then something approaching respect. A cargo hauler's determination was reshaping institutional responses. One human's choice was creating ripples across complex social structures. Hannah's medical evaluation revealed her unique physiological characteristics. She wasn't just a refugee. She was potentially a key to understanding complex ecological adaptation strategies. Independent research institutions became interested. Not as theoretical subjects, but as potential collaborators. "We can offer sanctuary," Maria explained during a final transmission. "Temporary settlement. Medical support. Cultural preservation resources." Jay watched Hannah. She understood something transformative was happening. Her posture changed. No longer just a survivor. Now a potential bridge between lost knowledge and future possibilities. The station hummed with quiet energy. Something was changing. Not dramatically. Not instantly. But fundamentally. One act of kindness was creating a network of support. Human intervention wasn't just about immediate rescue. It was about recognizing potential. About understanding that survival meant more than physical preservation. Hannah's eyes reflected a growing hope. Not just for herself, but for the fragments of her civilization she carried within her. The universe watched. Silent. Waiting. Weeks passed. The transformation was subtle at first, then unmistakable. Hannah learned quickly. Her mind, sharp and resilient, absorbed information like water into dry earth. The humanitarian support network provided her with medical care, language training, and gradual integration support. Jay watched her evolution with quiet amazement. The fragile creature he'd found in the station's corridor was gone. In her place stood a woman with purpose, with determination. Her posture changed. Her eyes burned with an intelligent fire that spoke of survival and hope. Research centers became interested in her unique biological knowledge. Her species had developed extraordinary planetary adaptation techniques, methods of terraforming that could transform harsh environments into livable spaces. What seemed like a lost civilization's final whisper was now becoming a potential key to solving complex ecological challenges. The galactic community slowly took notice. Independent human networks, not government bureaucracies, were the first to recognize her value. They saw beyond her status as a refugee. They saw a living repository of knowledge. Diplomatic channels that had been closed began to crack open. Hannah's story spread. Not as a tale of victimhood, but as a narrative of resilience. Scientists, researchers, humanitarian workers started asking questions. Listening. Her first public presentation was a turning point. Standing in a neutral conference space, she described her people's technological approaches to ecological management. Her voice was clear. Her data precise. The scientific community was stunned. Jay attended that presentation. He sat in the back, watching a transformation he had initiated with a simple meal pack weeks earlier. Other displaced species began to take notice. Here was someone who hadn't just survived. Someone who was rebuilding. Someone who was turning loss into opportunity. Humanitarian networks expanded their approach. Hannah became more than a case study. She became a symbol of potential. Of hope. Of what survival could truly mean. Her connection with Jay became legendary in certain circles. A cargo hauler and a refugee. An unexpected friendship that challenged established understanding of interspecies interactions. Governments that had previously ignored refugee crisis began to pay attention. Not out of compassion initially, but out of potential strategic value. Hannah's knowledge represented more than a humanitarian issue. It was a potential technological breakthrough. Research grants started flowing. Cultural preservation programs expanded. The idea of saving not just individual lives, but entire knowledge systems, gained momentum. Jay continued his cargo hauling work. But something had changed in him too. He was no longer just moving resources from one point to another. He understood now that human potential was about connection. About seeing value where others saw only difficulty. Months passed. Hannah developed a complex network of supporters. Scientists. Researchers. Humanitarian workers. Each interaction expanded her understanding. Each conversation rebuilt what had been destroyed. The galactic community watched. Something was changing. Slowly. Fundamentally. One act of kindness had created ripples. A meal shared. A moment of human compassion. Had transformed into something larger than anyone could have predicted. Hannah no longer represented just herself. She represented possibility. The potential of survival. The power of unexpected connection. Stars continued their silent journey. Worlds spun in their orbits. And somewhere, in the vast complexity of the universe, a story of transformation continued to unfold. Jay sometimes thought about that moment in the station corridor. How a simple choice could change everything. How humanity's greatest strength wasn't technology or power, but the ability to see potential in the most unexpected places. The universe watched. Waiting. Listening.